Well, the Dallas Stars have a tough road ahead of them, quite literally. Today marks the first game of their four-game road trip to a bunch of Eastern Conference opponents. Tonight's opponent will be the Buffalo Sabres, a team that the Stars haven't seen in quite some time. On today's show, I'll give you a full preview of this matchup and give you the names to be on the lookout for, the matchups to be on the lookout for, and give you a little bit of information to get you caught up to speed on what's happened in Buffalo since these teams have met. All of this coming up on a Thursday edition of Locked On Stars.
Your Locked On Stars, your daily podcast on the Dallas Stars. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Howdy, Stars fans. Welcome back to the Locked On Stars podcast, the only daily podcast covering the Dallas Stars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. I'm your host, Dane Lewis, your local expert on the Dallas Stars, and it is Thursday, January 20th. Time continues to fly by this month of January. It's a new day, and the Dallas Stars have a new opponent this season, and really a new opponent for the first time in a long time. The Dallas Stars and Buffalo Sabres meeting for the first time since January 2020. We'll give you a full preview of this matchup and give you all of the things to be looking forward to for tonight's game. But before we get into all the good stuff, do want to take a moment and say thank you for stopping by today's episode of Locked On Stars. Whether this is your first time here or you are a recurring listener, thank you for making Locked On Stars your first listen of the day. Be sure to subscribe to and follow the Locked On Stars podcast wherever you get your podcast at, whether that's on YouTube or your favorite podcasting platform. Remember, no matter where you listen or how you listen, the show is always 100% free. Now, let's get right into today's show. And before we talk about tonight's matchup, there is some important news that came out yesterday afternoon. The NHL has finally come out and rescheduled all of the games that were postponed a little bit after Christmas, the late 2021 games, some early 2022 games. All of these postponed games due to COVID-19 have now been rescheduled, and now the teams are going to be able to play. It looks like, at least for the Stars, a lot of these games will be taking place during the 2022 Winter Olympics in Beijing. As we all know, the NHL players are now unable to participate in the Beijing Olympics, and so they'll all be here stateside anyway, and the NHL looking to get all of these games made up in this time. So really, the NHL not really missing a beat as far as having to take this weird 2 to 3 week pause for the Olympics. I believe the Stars will have about an 8-game break in between a game on February 1st against the Calgary Flames. And then their next game after that will be Wednesday, February 9th against the Nashville Predators at home at 7 o'clock. And the Stars, the way that this schedule is structured, is 3 home games, 3 away games, and they are as follows. The aforementioned Stars Predators matchup on Wednesday, February 9th at 7 o'clock. And then the Stars will play at home on Friday, February 11th at 7:30 against the Winnipeg Jets. They'll play at home again on Super Bowl Sunday, February 13th at 1 o'clock in the afternoon against the Colorado Avalanche. And then the Stars will hit the road for the next 3 games. First, they'll be taking on the Avs again in Colorado on Tuesday, February 15th, at 8 o'clock. 7 o'clock Colorado time, so a little bit of a later start here in Texas. Then the Stars will head to Chicago on February 18th at 7:30, a Friday, to take on the Chicago Blackhawks, and then they will close out these rescheduled games, close out this road trip with a date with the Arizona Coyotes in Arizona on Sunday, February 20th at 6 o'clock in the evening. So going to be very interesting to see these games finally unfold. All of these games, divisional games, so all of these games are going to hold an incredible amount of weight for this Dallas Stars team in terms of where they end up in the playoff race. And the Stars have had a pretty decent season, a pretty middle of the pack season as far as division records go. They are 6-5-1 against Central Division opponents so far this season. And, no divisional games will be played for the Stars between now and that game against Nashville, the rescheduled game there that will be on February 9th. Every game, between now and then is a game against Eastern Conference opponents, not even Western Conference teams. And, this road trip and this next stretch of games especially is going to be very, very interesting for the Dallas Stars, just to kind of see how they're prepared to take on these divisional opponents, because getting some wins here on this road trip and even into this kind of next 3-game homestand that they'll have afterwards, or really even longer homestand with some of the rescheduled games, going to say a lot about how prepared this team is to take on these divisional opponents, because these divisional games will do a little bit more for the standings, because so many Central Division teams are in competition for, a top 3 spot in the division, or at least a wild card spot. It's going to be tough on this road trip playing some of these middle pack, even some better teams like Detroit. But then after that, they come home to play Washington, Boston, and Calgary, 3 teams that are very capable in their own right. Washington having one heck of a season. Boston, not at the top of their division, but still having a pretty nice season overall, and gave the Stars some trouble back at their first meeting in Boston to start the season. And then Calgary, we know how good they are. The Stars also got the best of them in OT whenever these teams first met in Calgary back in the earlier stages of the season. But always hard to beat a team twice in any professional sport, especially the NHL. But the Stars still holding a pretty good home record despite what we saw on Tuesday against the Montreal Canadiens. But the Stars do tend to play pretty well at home against superior competition. So maybe we'll see the Stars win 2 or 3 of those games. But again, all going to come down to how they perform on this road trip, how they perform in those 3 home games against those strong Eastern Conference opponents, and then a Western Conference opponent in Calgary, and then 6 straight divisional games. Going to do a lot for the Stars in terms of playoff positioning, and we really need to see them bring their A game. And I'm really hoping that Tuesday night's loss is a turning point in this season for the Stars, because a loss like that, it's certainly going to be an impactful moment for this season. It's either going to be positive, where the Stars turn a new page and they kind of figure some things out and inspire themselves to be better, or it's going to be a turning point in the sense that they've reached this new low and they never really rise out of the ashes of defeat at the hands of the Canadians. And so this road trip and these next several games against some pretty good competition are going to be pretty telling of how the Stars are, how they feel coming out of this loss to the 7-win, now 8-win Montreal Canadiens. Going to be a very, very interesting test for the Stars moving forward. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline.ag. BetOnline would like to wish you a happy new betting year as we continue our march to the playoffs and beyond. BetOnline remains the number 1 spot for all the sports wagering action for 2022. It's a new year, and there's a new updated desktop and mobile website where you can sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use our promo code LOCKEDON to get started. From football, basketball, hockey, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games, don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2022 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet all of your favorite sports. BetOnline.ag, where the game starts. Jumping back into today's episode of Locked On Stars, your first listen of the day. It's finally time to preview this big matchup. Had to talk about the schedule a little bit first, because that is big news for the Stars and for the NHL as a whole to finally get these games rescheduled. But now shifting the focus to tonight's game. Got to take things one game at a time, the Dallas Stars do, in order to get back into the playoff race, back into the thick of things. And tonight's date is with the Buffalo Sabres, a team, like I mentioned at the top of the show, that they have not seen in quite some time. The last meeting between these two teams was literally over 2 years ago. January 16th, 2020, the Buffalo Sabres came out on top by a score of 4-1 at the American Airlines Center. Jamie Benn getting the lone Stars goal in that game. And we weren't too far out from the world completely being flipped upside down at that point. Things felt a little bit more normal back on January 16th, even though the Stars were losing to the even then struggling Buffalo Sabres. And they lost to them earlier that season, back when the team was really, really bad and had only won one game, I think, up to that point, an OT win against the Capitals. So they lost their last season series with the Sabres by a 0-2 count. Looking to maybe turn the tide a little bit this season. The Sabres still struggling, still in their rebuilding phase. The biggest storyline for them this season has clearly been the trade of superstar forward Jack Eichel to the Vegas Golden Knights. Not a whole lot of other, news stories that I've seen, at least from the Buffalo Sabres. This is a team that I had to do quite a bit of research on, just because not living near or even, remotely close to Buffalo, my team not playing in the Eastern Conference, let alone that Atlantic Division. Just a team that I don't know a whole lot about and haven't really seen a whole lot about, because there's not a whole lot to be talking about with this team, because they do sit 6th in their division, the Atlantic Division, like I said, at 12-20-7. The Stars sit at 6th in their division, but a little bit of a different story, as they still have a barely winning record, but still a winning record nonetheless. And the Stars still at least aspiring to be in the playoffs, where a team like Buffalo, I think at this point, is looking kind of towards next season, looking towards the future, as they know there's some really, really talented teams in this Eastern Conference that are looking to make the playoffs over them. But nonetheless, Buffalo is coming off a 3-1 win over the Ottawa Senators, a team that has given the Dallas Stars fits this season and their two matchups with them. But overall, the Sabres have had a pretty rough month of January. Some of the games that they've played include a 4-3 overtime loss to Boston, a 6-1 loss to Tampa Bay, a 4-1 loss to Nashville, and of course, some back-to-back losses to Detroit. I believe the first of those games was a 4-0 shutout, and then the next game, I think it was 4-3 or 3-2, an overtime loss at the hands of the Detroit Red Wings, a team in their division. So they are coming off a win against the pretty measly at times Ottawa Senators, but an overall rough month of January, an overall rough season for the Sabres squad. And so, maybe not riding a whole lot of momentum coming into this game, maybe just a little bit. They're led by Jeff Skinner, a longtime Carolina Hurricane, now a Buffalo Sabre. He leads his team with 24 points, only 14 goals on the season, but he does have 5 points in the last 5 Sabres games. So definitely a guy to be on the lookout for. Seems to be trending upwards as of right now. Skinner does definitely on the rise. A guy who's been around this league for a decent amount of time, still has quite a bit, playing years left in him, but a guy who's still relatively new to Buffalo, still kind of getting his feet under him, but leading the team this season, kind of the guy that's having to step up, if you will, I guess, in place of Jack Eichel, who wasn't even playing for Buffalo this season, was needing surgery. Now has gotten that surgery and looking to make a comeback very, very soon for the Vegas Golden Knights over in the Pacific Division. Another guy to be on the lookout for, speaking of that Jack Eichel trade, is Alex Tuck. He was the 18th overall pick for the Minnesota Wild back in 2014, and he was a big part of that aforementioned Eichel trade. He was sent to Buffalo from Vegas. He's only played in 7 games so far this season, but he has 7 points. So he's pretty much averaging a point a game at this point, 2 goals, 5 assists. A really talented youngster in this league, a guy that, that was seeing some time in Vegas, but now playing for this Buffalo team seems to be trending upward as he's just now kind of getting his start to the season. Like I said, only 7 games played, but a guy that certainly the Stars will need to be on the lookout for, a guy that, has built some chemistry with his teammates now, looking to be a threat for this Buffalo team this season and for the foreseeable future. And this team, I think it's interesting. I think that they're in a very, very similar position as the Montreal Canadiens were coming into Tuesday night's game. They're a struggling team, a team that's clearly in rebuilding mode right now, not looking to make the playoffs, no championship aspirations whatsoever. But you could make an argument that, they're due for a win like this. They are coming off a win, but they're coming off a win against a pretty weak Ottawa team. But this is the kind of game that I think the Stars could easily fall into the trap, if you will, of calling this a trap game, where the Stars on paper are better. They have the advantage in power play percentage. They have the advantage in the face-off circle. The Stars do. Pretty much anywhere there's a statistical advantage to be had, the Stars have the lead in that. I would argue, their best player, probably Joe Pavelski right now, is better than Jeff Skinner. I don't think that there's too much debate to be made about that point. But again, this is just the kind of game, especially on the road, that I think the Stars could fall victim to some mistakes that they make. And I think a team like Buffalo, is in rebuilding mode, as they are very much in that mode. They could capitalize on those mistakes and get a win at home. And they're certainly going to be looking to do that. And so definitely one of those things to be on the lookout for in this game, as Buffalo looking to right the ship a little bit this season. Dallas, a struggling road team, which we'll talk about in just a second. So it could be a recipe for disaster. Hopefully the Stars can, find themselves a little bit on this road trip. I know Tyler Seguin mentioned that in Tuesday night's post-game press conference, that hopefully, that loss to Montreal on Tuesday is a blessing in disguise, and this team is able to find themselves on the road, finally find some identity and some consistency on the road, and string together some wins, and finally move themselves from what I think is a B- B team to a B+, A- kind of team, or maybe even an A team, if they can really, really get things figured out and really get things going. But that's very much easier said than done. I don't know how confident I am in this team going into this road trip as a whole. Certainly hope they can win at least one game. And I feel like I'm stooping too low there. But at this point, that's all I'm really thinking that they're going to come out with. Playing 4 games away from home, I think realistically their best chance is 1 win. I hope I'm wrong about that. But they just haven't given me any reason to believe that they're going to come away from this road trip with at least more than 2 points. I'm very, very worried going into a game like this, and I think they need to set the tone early against a team like Buffalo, who's treading water pretty much at this point, and a team that at the Dallas Stars, if they're playing at their best, can very well find themselves coming out victorious. And to close out today's episode of Locked On Stars, it's prediction time on today's episode. I'm going to be talking about my final thoughts on this game, my predictions going into this matchup against the Buffalo Sabres. And, as we were kind of saying last segment, carrying over into this one, the Dallas Stars are literally the worst team in the NHL on the road. We've been saying it all season. Oh, the Stars are bad on the road. They can't win on the road. No, they are literally the worst team with a 4-12-1 record, 9 points. That is the least amount of points for any team in the National Hockey League this season on the road. That's below Arizona. That's below Montreal. That's below Ottawa. That's below even the Buffalo Sabres that we're playing tonight, 32nd in the league. So quite literally the worst team on the road. Buffalo, however, just kind of running some numbers by you, is 28th ranked team in the league at home with a 6-11-3 record. Buffalo's record isn't much better on the road. I think they only have 6 road wins as well, and maybe I think like 9 losses and 4 overtime losses, something like that. But not much better on the road, but not a very good team at home, not a very good team overall this season. But good to know that even though the Stars struggle on the road this season, it looks like Buffalo doesn't fare much better even playing in their own building. So I think with numbers like that, this game has the potential to be very sloppy on both ends and maybe potentially high scoring, with both teams making some mistakes that lead to other goals for whichever other team. Whether that's offensive turnovers in the neutral zone or just kind of weird loose pucks, maybe some sloppy goalie play, things I feel like could get very high scoring, and it could get very lopsided as well, depending on which team is able to take advantage of momentum the most throughout this game. Running some more numbers by you, just kind of leaning into that. Buffalo is 4th in the league this season in goals allowed at home at 67. So that's not a good thing. Being 4th place on this list is not where you want to be. They give up the 4th most goals in the National Hockey League at home at 67. Dallas is 17th in the league in goals allowed on the road at 61, which is actually pretty surprising to me. When I looked that up, I expected them to be a lot higher on the list. But it's interesting, and I think that's a testament to how close some of these Stars games on the road can really be, and how well sometimes they play teams on the road. Like you look back to that recent St. Louis game, the San Jose game, I think even the Vegas. Well, they gave up 5 goals in that Las Vegas game back in December, but still, I think it's a testament to how good the defense can be at times. Putting the Stars middle of the pack. I mean, still not great numbers, but 17th certainly isn't terrible. Very much middle of the pack, and kind of under the radar the defense is on the road. However, the Dallas Stars are 32nd in the league, so worst in the league because there's only 32 teams in the National Hockey League, in case you didn't know that, in goals on the road at 32. So the Stars have only scored 32 goals on the road this season, which is the worst in the NHL. Ironic, 32nd place, 32 goals on the road this season. So both of these teams struggling in the positions that they're at. Stars playing on the road, Buffalo playing at home. Seems like neither team really has the advantage there. But I think, we can still expect a big game from some guys on the Stars team. Joe Pavelski has 9 points in his last 5 games that he's played. I do expect Braden Holtz to get the start tonight. I've joked a lot recently how I'm wrong about a lot of my goalie picks, but I'm very, very confident in this one, especially given the game that Jake Oettinger had on Tuesday and the game that he had on Friday, against the Florida Panthers. Now Braden Holtz is back from COVID protocol. He did get a little bit of playtime on Tuesday in relief of Jake Oettinger, so I think he's finally ready now after that and some practice appearances that he's going to be fully ready to play a full game against a team like Buffalo. And I really, really expect him to have a big game. I hope he's able to have a big game to kind of regain some momentum for himself, and then hopefully, take a little bit of the burden off Jake Oettinger. I think that that's been a lot of the issues that Jake has been dealing with as of late, is, having to kind of bear the weight of the goalie responsibilities on his shoulder. I mean, Anton Hudobin did come up from the AHL, but Hudobin not having the season here at the NHL level that we wanted him to, certainly a shell of his former self. And so I feel like a lot of the weight has been placed on Jake's shoulders, which is just a hard responsibility to bear at this point in his career. He's had a pretty smooth career so far this season, but struggled a little bit in his last few games, which I think is inevitable when you put a guy as young as him in a position like that. But now he has his goalie partner back in Holtby, so I expect Holtby to start, and I expect him to have a big game. I expect Denis Gurianov to have a big game. he was limited to some minutes on Tuesday night because he was coming back from COVID protocol. But now I think, again, with a game time minutes and some practice minutes, I expect him to be closer to somewhat normal game health, game conditioning, and I hope he can produce in this game, especially if he's on that second line or any line, wherever they're placed, with Tyler and Jamie. I think that they can really get things going and be a force to be reckoned with on the road, as we saw whenever the Stars first came out of their COVID hiatus. I think finally, if all three of those guys are in really good game shape, that they can do some damage. And I think that that's going to be really crucial here on the road, is for the Stars to produce goals at high volumes. And so I like the Stars in this game. As pessimistic as I'm being about the Stars on this road trip, I think they really do need to set the tone for this road trip. And I think that they have the capability to do it, especially after like the loss that they just took to the Canadians. I think they're going to come out on fire, maybe a little bit of anger and mojo in their game. I like the Stars in this game at a score of 6-4, and I'll take Jamie Benn with the first goal. I haven't seen the captain find the back of the net in a while, and I think he's due, especially if he's going to be playing on a line with Tyler and Dennis. But that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked on Stars. Be sure to tune in tomorrow for a full breakdown of this game, as well as a little bit of a preview of the Stars' next game against the Red Wings over the weekend, or I guess on Friday night, kind of ushering you into the weekend. Thank you again for making Locked on Stars your first listen of the day. Now go make your second listen of the day, the Locked on Bets podcast, free and available wherever you get your podcast at. Get all of your sports gambling needs and questions met and answered by your boy Q and Lee Sterling. Those guys will hook you up. Be sure to also subscribe to and follow the Locked on Stars podcast if you do not do so already. We can be found on YouTube or your favorite podcasting platform. Be sure to also rate and review if you like what you hear. Truly does help me and the show out a ton. You can also find me on social media and follow me there if you don't already. I'm on Twitter at Dane_Lewis. That's at DANE 2_Lewis. You can also find and follow the show on Twitter at Locked on Stars. Appreciate all the follows there as well. But we will see you tomorrow, Stars fans. Let's hope that tomorrow we'll be talking about a Stars victory. I'm excited for it. I'm excited to watch this game. I think that we're, maybe going to see the turning of a leaf for the Stars team on the road, or we're going to see this team come out flat and stagnant, and we're going to be really sad. But hoping for the first thing I mentioned, hoping to be optimistic, and hopefully we'll be celebrating a Stars win over the Buffalo Sabres. We'll see you tomorrow, Stars fans. Have a great Thursday.